Welcome back. I'm your host, Leslie Cottle, and you are listening to This Empowered Life podcast, the weekly podcast delivering tools, knowledge, and wisdom to empower the soul. Today's episode is called Entering the World Post-COVID. If you're wondering how to reflect on the past year while also creating a new, safe, yummy, normal life that you desire, keep on listening. Hello. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. This is the first week of the new model of the podcast where it's now once a week. And I'm really excited for this week's topic. It's entering the world post-COVID, or really post-quarantine. And, my neighbor is stomping. I'm not sure if you can hear them. But today I'm going to talk about two things, and we are going to go over the reflection period of when we're entering the world post-COVID. So that's where you can look back and intimately look at your past year. And then you also might want to grab a journal for that. It might be helpful. And then second, we will talk about the invitation. So the invitation of now that we've had this year of isolation, now we have this opportunity to invite things back into our lives in a really mindful way. So we have a little bit of looking back and a little bit of looking forward and a little of recognizing that we are starting to come out of a massive collective trauma. And coming out of a massive collective trauma is going to look and feel different for everyone. It can take as little as 7 days of isolation to experience fear of social interaction. 7 days. And we just went through a year plus of isolation. So if you're feeling fidgety or unsure or unsafe about re-entering the world, know that it's really, really normal. And I keep hearing this comment from so many people, and everyone says, it's just like this year didn't even happen. And they're talking about how they've mentally blocked out COVID, how they've mentally blocked out the quarantine, and how they've mentally blocked out the stress of the year. And honestly, I can relate a lot to them. I also have a similar experience where I'm out and I think to myself, everything looks so normal. Did that actually happen? Was that actually just a bad dream? Was it just me? And I have to remind myself to stay present and to not fully ignore and disengage with the last year, but also to remember that it did happen. It happened. And it's okay to move really, really slow right now because it was a lot. It was a heavy year, and you're not going to just snap back into the way that things used to be, because things are never going to be the way that they used to be. Everything is new right now, and it's really okay to go really slow, because a lot of things happened last year, even if it seemed like it didn't. So let's talk about reflecting on this time. And again, if it feels right, grab a journal, jot down some cues to ask yourself, pause the recording if you want, do whatever you want because you're the boss and you're amazing. So as we look at this experience over the last year plus, we have to acknowledge what a heavy year it was and look at these lessons that we can take into the real world now. So first, I want you to take a few minutes to acknowledge if you had any hardships over the past year. Any hardships at all. If you were scared, if you were lost at any point, if you felt confused, if you were angry. Did you have trouble with your family life? Did you have trouble with your job? Was taking care of the kids hard? Did you lose your home this year? Did you have trouble with finances? How is your health? Did you lose someone this year? Or even many people? Acknowledge all of it. And especially acknowledge the things that at the time you might have brushed under the rug because you were in survival mode. I don't want to force anything on you. So if it doesn't feel right to do that, don't. But it's better for us to acknowledge these things than to have to deal with them later. And as I sat down while I was writing this episode, I actually had my own experience where I realized that I hadn't dealt with some things that happened with me during COVID. In the very beginning of this year, or of March last year, when COVID hit, all 3 streams of my income were lost overnight. I had no more income. And I did what I had to do. I figured it out, but it was one of the most stressful times in my life, not to mention that there was a global pandemic going on. And I had completely forgotten about this until I wrote this episode, and I had to go do some clearing work of my own to really process this. And so for you, I want you to really acknowledge things that happened this year and allow yourself to go there. Allow yourself to feel it. Did you feel helpless? Did you feel out of control? Did you feel worthless? I don't know. You tell me, but how did it make you feel when these things came up? And is it something that needs to be cleared or healed or sat with or nurtured? Because you owe it to yourself to do the work, to allow yourself to move on from it. So after you do this, I want you to get a new piece of paper. Maybe take a little breath in and a little breath out for a little refresh. And now I want you to reflect on the people and the communities who really showed up for you during quarantine. Who was there for you? Who made quarantine doable? Who made it doable, right? A year-long quarantine, a worldwide pandemic. This was not easy. But who made it easier for you? It might have been a friend. It might have been a family member. Your work might have really been supportive. Your landlord, your neighbor. Maybe just someone completely random. Maybe a stranger who gave you a smile on the street behind a mask. Who made it doable for you? Who made you say, wow, I am so glad that person was there for me in that moment? For me, the most unexpected people turned up in my life. My landlord really showed up for me. My sister and her brother-in-law really showed up for me. My parents really showed up for me. And I even had this friend who prior to COVID, we texted every now and then, but he was someone who just texted me almost every single day. And he became this little angel in my life too, just by saying, hi, how's everything going? How are you doing with all of this crazy stuff in the world? And at the time, it made me feel just so less alone. Because at the time, I did feel really alone. And then the third thing that I want you to journal about or ponder on is, what lessons did you learn from the past year? There might be many lessons, there might be few, but what lessons can you take away from your time in isolation or in quarantine, or from the experiences that you had in the past year? And how can you bring those into your life now? So I think it's really important to reflect on all of those. The hardships, the lessons, also the community that really helped you get through it. And we get to have a lot of gratitude for these things being in the past now. And also a lot of gratitude for all of those things getting us to where you are now. And I want you to recognize through this process if there's any kind of clearing work that you need to do to release and honor what happened over the last year. And give yourself the time and the space to be able to do that. Whatever that looks like for you, whether you're meditating in a corner or you make a whole big week out of it, that's like a death and rebirth and celebration, whether it's just, noting things as your day goes by. Just make sure that you have gratitude and also are releasing these things and acknowledging them as the time goes on. So next, let's talk about the invitation of post-quarantine life. So where I am in New York City, we are open. And I think the city's fully open in just a few days on July 1st. And for me, it's a little intense. This city has always had a really special vibe. And right now we are in full force. So after this past year, it feels really intense for me, but it would also be really easy to just go back to the way that things used to be. So I could go back to the same places, hang out with all the same people, do all the same things that I did pre-COVID, but I see a major opportunity right now. When you think about the invitation of coming into this new world, wherever you are, you've possibly been isolated for over a year, and a lot of things got cut out of your life. So when you go out into the world, you have a huge opportunity to be selective. And even more selective than you've ever been in your entire life. Because you don't have this momentum of, we always used to do that. Everything is this fresh start. Everything's from scratch. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want to invite into my life? If everything that comes into your life from now on requires a personal invitation from you, what are you giving invitations to? Who are you giving invitations to? And whether we're talking about work or friends or an event or food or exercise, the way you spend your time, hobbies, whether they're old or new, the places that you go, the place that you live, literally everything. What kind of energy are you letting back in? Because when you let something in, when you accept an invitation, it means it's cutting something else out. So make sure what you're accepting in is actually what you want to call in. And ask yourself, what kind of experiences do I actually want to invite into my life? This is huge, huge, huge. I cannot stress enough that we have never had an opportunity like this before in our life. So take this opportunity to pause, to reflect on what it is that you desire. Because you don't have to call in everyone and everything from before. And I bet that your life would actually be a lot richer and a lot more aligned if you left some things behind. So I hope that gave you some real things to think about and some real things to reflect on. Your time is so precious, and you deserve to be soaking up every ounce of it the way that you desire. Tune in Tuesdays for more yummy and soulful episodes. If you love what you're hearing and want to support the podcast, please follow and rate the podcast on Spotify and Apple to help new listeners find us. To find out more about my coaching and healing practice, head over to my website, www.lesliecottle.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.